6, humor welcomes. Hospitality is an important virtue in both the Old and New Testaments. Abraham and Sarah were rewarded for their hospitality to 3 strangers with the birth of their son Isaac. By the way, you'll remember that the elderly Sarah laughs when she hears the news about the birth of her son, and they name him Isaac, which comes from the Hebrew word yitzhak, which means he laughs. And in the New Testament, the act of welcoming Jesus into one's home is a sign of one's acceptance of Jesus. Jesus himself welcomed those who were outsiders in the community by healing them and casting out demons. He was showing God's hospitality. Humor is one way of showing hospitality. Maybe the easiest way to get someone to feel at home is to make him or her laugh. You know that a gathering is successful and that people feel at home when they start to laugh. A few years ago, I was working in Nairobi, Kenya with refugees. At the end of my first year, I signed up for an 8-day retreat at the Jesuit retreat house in Nairobi. On the last day of the retreat, there was a big celebratory dinner, and everyone was supposed to stand up and speak about his or her retreat. When I looked around, I realized that the few other men who were on the retreat, the priests and brothers, had already left. So when I stood up and looked around, it was just me and 50 African sisters. And I felt a little strange and worried that I might say somehow the wrong thing in a foreign culture and among all these African sisters. So I blurted out, "Wow, I guess I'm the only man here." And from across the room, an African sister yelled out, "And blessed are you among women." Everyone laughed, and I felt right at home and could talk about my retreat with them. Laughter had welcomed me. 7, humor is healing. Physicians, psychologists, and psychiatrists believe that humor helps the healing process in the physical body. Laughter releases endorphins. And if we take seriously the Pauline image of the body of Christ, we might consider that the same holds true for the Christian community. In the midst of some bad times in our churches, the people of God could use from time to time some laughter. That's not to say that one laughs about pain or sin in the church. Rather, humor gives us a much-needed break and can help us to heal. It also helps lighten some painful situations. A few years ago, the Jesuit provincial of New York, that is the head of the Jesuits in New York, was visiting the province infirmary where all the elderly Jesuits live. And the provincial said, as part of his sort of state of the province, "Well, one of the big problems in our province is that we have so many elderly and sick Jesuits, and we have nowhere to put them. There isn't enough room for them even here in the infirmary." And one old New York Jesuit yelled out, "Father Provincial, we're dying as fast as we can." Number 8, humor fosters good relations and helps with our work. In his parables, Jesus used humor to help people understand difficult topics. Consider a more secular example of the use of humor in management. In Doris Kearns Goodwin's wonderful book, Team of Rivals, she tells the story of how Abraham Lincoln gathered together a very different group of men around him in his cabinet. Most of the times they disagreed with one another, quarreled with one another, and even worked against one another. One way that Lincoln lightened the atmosphere or made a point without offending anyone was to tell a good joke or what he called a little country story to illustrate his point. Humor can make for good social relations. 9, humor opens our minds. Neuroscientists tell us that when we laugh, we release endorphins and can relax. Psychologists say that when we relax, we feel less threatened and are more able to listen and learn. So laughter helps to get your message across. Likewise, laughter can signal a sudden spiritual insight. Often in spiritual direction, when people finally, I see Margaret Silva out there, I hope she agrees, when people finally realize how foolish or sinful or selfish they have been acting, they laugh. They laugh at themselves and they laugh at how foolish they have been to turn away from God. It's funny to think of how human we all are, and it's joyful to know that we've been freed by God. Laughter both deepens and reveals understanding. Finally, number 10, humor is fun. Let me repeat that. It's fun. There may be no better reason for humor than that. God forbid that religious people should actually enjoy themselves and have fun. Fun, a word you don't hear in church much, is a foretaste of heaven. The saints understood this, and I would bet that the man whose first miracle was to turn water into wine understood the need for some high spirits in life. So to that end, I will end with what else? A joke. Why? Well, you know now that the better question is, why not? A Jesuit priest and a Franciscan friar are driving to the RBTE. They're talking about liberation theology, and they get into this big argument, and they swerve off the road, and they hit a telephone pole, and they go straight to heaven. And the Jesuit and Franciscan suddenly find themselves standing in front of the gates of heaven, which are hidden behind some big white clouds, which is actually the way it is in heaven. And they're all pretty excited, thinking, you know, I spent my life serving God and the church and all that, and, you know, I'm pretty excited to see what heaven's like. Anyway, in a few minutes, the clouds part, the gates of heaven open, the trumpets sound, and hundreds of angels start flying around and singing. Then a long red carpet rolls up, all the way up to the foot of the Jesuit. And out come all these Jesuit saints. Aloysius Gonzaga, Francis Xavier, John Francis Regis. They all hug the Jesuit, who's overjoyed. And then out comes St. Ignatius Loyola, the founder of the Jesuits. And then he hugs the Jesuit. And then out comes Mary. And they all fall to their knees, and they all take out their rosaries and say, Hail Mary. Mary does not say that because she doesn't pray that prayer herself. And St. Ignatius, she's wearing blue too. Because that's what she wears in heaven. So St. Ignatius introduces her to the Jesuit, and she hugs the Jesuit too. Then there's this big trumpet blast, and out comes Jesus. And they all fall to their knees, and Jesus says, stand up, and he says, welcome to heaven. And they all hug each other, Mary and Jesus and the Jesuits and this new Jesuit. They all hug each other. Everybody starts singing. They start singing St. Louis Jesuit songs, which is what they sing in heaven. And they all go inside to heaven laughing and singing. So then the carpet rolls back up, and the angels go away, and the gates close, and the clouds come back, and the Franciscan is left standing there at the gate by himself. And he's pretty excited, wondering who's going to welcome him. Is it going to be Francis or St. Clair or Bonaventure? And so he waits, and he waits some more, and looks at he still has his watch on, even though there's not time in heaven. He looks at his watch, and it's about a half an hour, and he waits an hour, and then it's an hour and a half, and he's starting to get a little ticked off. So finally, after 2 hours, this little side door opens, and this saint, who he doesn't even know who it is, he's in a Franciscan habit, says, hey. And the Franciscan says, me? And he goes, yeah, you. He says, come over here. And so the Franciscan goes up to the door, and the little saint says, welcome to heaven. And the Franciscan says, that's it? And the little saint says, that's what? What do you mean? And the Franciscan says, oh, come on, he says. This is the crummy welcome I get? I mean, the Jesuit gets the trumpets and the angels and the red carpet and the saints and all those Jesuit saints and the Blessed Mother and Jesus, and all I get is this? And the little saint says, oh, right. He says, you have to understand something. We get Franciscans up here every day. We haven't had a Jesuit for 350 years.